Welcome back, everybody. Moving into the final session of the morning now, where we're going to be having a look at some of the very modest green shoots of recovery and emerging trends in those bookings and inquiries that have been coming in the past few weeks. Juan mentioned at the very beginning that the market was considerably down, of course, year on year in terms of new pipeline bookings, but that some have been coming in. Under no illusions that the barriers to outbound travel are not very big at the moment, not least Boris's announcement yesterday about the self-quarantine rules now. And lots of questions still about how we make flying safe. But we've been asking travel agents on a weekly basis whether they are getting inquiries and taking bookings. And there has been some positivity there, that there's an upward curve and that some customers are interested in booking. So in this final session, we're going to be having a look at which destinations are inspiring clients the most. Also, which demographics seem to be proving most confident about making a future booking, and also considering some of the emerging trends and how travel providers can adapt to what travellers will be looking for in this sort of new world. We have a fantastic panel joining us for this last conversation. Derek Jones, who is Chief Executive of Touristik UK, many well-known brands in his armoury there, including Kuoni, Carrier, Journey Latin America, CV Villas and Kirka. Hello, Derek. Hi. Also joined by Lisa McAuley, who is the Managing Director of B2B Tour Operations for Dnata Travel Europe. So that's the trade-only brands Gold Medal and Travel2, and their luxury sister brands. But of course, the Dnata Travel Group is much wider, including Net Flights, Emirates Holidays, Republic and Travelbag. And finally, Julia Lo-Bue, who is the Chief Executive of Advantage Travel Partnership, which is one of the UK's biggest consortiums of travel agencies covering both leisure and corporate. Good morning to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us for today's conversation. I'll perhaps come to you first if I can, Julia, because I know Advantage undertook quite a significant piece of consumer research over the last few weeks with some quite interesting results. Would you be able to share some of that to get us going?
Yeah, of course. Hi, morning everybody. So we decided to undertake some consumer research a few weeks back, really just to try and temperature test consumer sentiment. We had a phenomenal response. So over 4,000 consumers responded to the survey, and the survey was obviously put out through we don't have our own database, so it's put out through our members and asking our members to pass this on to their customers. So this wasn't completed by travel industry individuals, it was put out to the consumers via the members' databases. So yeah, response has been really really overwhelming, and I guess some of it not a surprise. Certainly confidence is a big aspect, and I'm sure we'll talk about that really came out from the survey. But one of the things we did find, 2/3 of all consumers felt that they're at this moment in time that their travel plans based on restrictions being lifted haven't been affected for future bookings. So I think there was a common view that actually for this year, clearly different travel plans would need to be considered given where we are. But certainly for future bookings, they were confident that their plans hadn't been affected. And one of the other interesting things, which I heard on the previous panel that you had, that the millennials are the area where we felt, or certainly that came through the survey, felt more confident in travel. But really interesting that there was a rise in how many of those millennials would be booking through travel agents. So out of the 18 to 30 demographic, I'm not sure that's quite millennials, but as that age bracket, 55% said they would consider booking through a travel agent, so for their future planning, for their future holidays. So that's great. So, and I think one of the other points that came out was certainly from the destinations that they would feel more comfortable right now in traveling to. Europe came through as the area, the region that they would feel more comfortable right now to consider traveling. And that was 23% of those that responded said that they would feel safer to travel short term. I mean, whatever that term is, but certainly Europe would be their first choice of destination.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. That's really interesting to hear so much positivity from consumers, actually. Derek and Lisa, could I come to you and ask if Julie, as a consumer researcher, would support any bookings that you guys have been seeing in the last few weeks? And yeah, I appreciate it's small numbers, but just interesting to consider any trends which are starting to come through. Derek?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, it's not really small numbers. We've seen slow but steady growth in the number of people who are coming in with new bookings. So these aren't rebookings, these are people who are coming new into market. So since the start of April, which is what, about 5 weeks ago now, we're between £1 and £2 million worth of new revenue, and actually edging closer towards £2 million of new revenue quite quickly. So versus what we would have been doing at this time, that's very small. But actually, relative to what you read in the media, what you read in the newspapers, actually there's a large number of people who are out there in market and are interested in booking. Whole range of destinations. Well, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that a little bit later. I mean, obviously, we don't have a huge Europe program, so we're maybe not seeing that. But we're seeing for 2021, where 87% of our bookings, new bookings in the last month, have been for next year rather than this year. Anything to do with special occasions, so special birthdays, anniversaries, honeymoons, things that people are looking forward to and have no reason to stop looking forward to, and they want to get it in the diary, they want to know that that's organised, then we're seeing significant demand in that sector.
That's great. And Lisa, is it there's some notes of positivity across your brands?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was reported in TTG just last week that we took a pure luxury booking for £108,000. So we could all do with a few more of those coming in. Similar to what Derek said, really. Yes, we've seen an increase. So just in last week alone, we were 60% up on the prior week. But it's still really small numbers. So I don't want us to, get carried away in the kind of numbers that we're currently seeing. So destinations wise, if I look at long haul, it's predominantly Florida, specifically Orlando, Indian Ocean, weighted towards the Maldives and Dubai as well. And then in short haul, if I look at the other brands within the dnata group, it tends to be Spain #1, and that's Balearics, Canaries and Costas in that order, and then Turkey, followed by Greece. So there is demand there. And I think, we have seen week on week improvement as well. It will be interesting to see what happens this week in particular, given the announcement or the information that we're still waiting to hear with respect to quarantine period. But similar to what Derek said, most of the business we're seeing is into 2021 now. And that has been a change, because up until the last couple of weeks, really, a lot of it was into October or Q4 of this year. But that's been a definite swing. It's mainly into 21 now.
Yeah. It was interesting that the data that Juan shared right at the beginning of the morning, showing that actually there's still a lot of bookings in the system for travel to the US, say, in August. I think it's only 56% of this time last year, but that's still a good chunk of bookings that are there. Do we worry that with this new initiative around the 14-day quarantining, that we're going to see another flurry of cancellations for travel that was supposed to take place in July and August, say?
Yeah, I think undoubtedly it's a concern, but we have to wait. I believe the reports, there's a report at 2:00 with regards to more information on that. And I think until we have anything that's concrete, everything else is speculation, really. So it's, and that's one of the challenges with all of this. You're planning in speculation, and then you just have to be agile to move your policies accordingly. But yeah, the summer months, look, if we're realistic, the summer months, I think, are going to be a challenge. Anything before September, I think, will be a challenge. I think that's common sense would tell you that.
Derek, is there any more you can share around bookings that you have got in for the last half of this year? Are any bookings coming in for the winter season, say November, December?
No, very few. As I said, 87% of our new bookings are going into 2021. So what, 13% are booking, and those that are booking right at the very end. In fact, the majority are probably booking over that Christmas New Year period, where they're sort of still hoping that travel for that special occasion over Christmas New Year is still available. But no, I think realistically, the longer time's gone on, the longer lockdown's gone on, the more people have sort of, I just think, mentally adjusted to the reality of this situation. I think they've started to realise that booking new bookings for later this year is probably not appropriate right now. I think a lot of people, even if they still harbour an ambition to go away later this year, and let's be honest, I think most of us do, it would be lovely to think we could still get away this summer. I think people are being much more realistic, and even yesterday's update was moving into July for some children to go back to school, and that's not all children, that's just some years going back. So realistically, if children aren't even going back to school until September, I think people are drawing their own conclusions about travel later this summer, and concluding, maybe rightly or wrongly, but probably rightly, that that's not going to be on the agenda in terms of overseas travel. So they're moving forward. I think, I've said this a few times now, I think people came into this crisis with a holiday to look forward to. And sadly, that opportunity is now gone for most of them. But there's no reason why people wouldn't want to come out of this crisis with a holiday to look forward to. And I think that's the piece we need to focus on. We need to be focusing on, how do you give yourself something to look forward to? And even if that's 2021 or summer 2021, at least have something, in the bag, in the diary, ready to prepare for once this is all done.
Yeah.
I think sorry, just to add to what Derek said there, I think, if you look at the opportunity for the balance of year that we've got, there is the October half-term holiday that, we could see a shortening of lead-in times, I think, irrespective of whether you're looking for a long haul or a short haul holiday. I do anticipate that to be something that we see going forward, because people will be, wanting to understand how much money they may have available to spend, rather than that forward planning that particularly long haul travellers have done specifically. So there is still opportunity October half term and Christmas, but it really just does depend on how quickly we come out of all of this, and not only how quickly we come out of it, but ensuring that there's not a second spike for either us or those destinations that we want to travel to. So as I say, still a couple of school holidays, if you discount the summer holidays, that could have an appeal to family travellers.
Yeah. Advantage's research showed that maybe perhaps younger travellers will be particularly confident about booking at an earlier stage. Your brands, Derek, wouldn't necessarily be youth market focused, a much wider demographic. Is that frustrating that you might not be able to capitalise on that apparent trend that millennials are going to be the first back to go back everywhere?
Yeah, I'm not personally absolutely convinced that is the case. And having said that, we have our brand Meraki, which is an online only brand, and traffic has been actually holding up very well on that brand. We've had a lot of people actually going all the way through to final book screen, not many booking, but clearly a lot of people are using downtime to explore online and to look for opportunities. So you're absolutely right. I think there's probably more confidence, but the numbers that we're seeing, even for families, we've got families booking for summer next year, multi-generational holidays are back in play. And I think, yeah, it may be skewed one way or the other, but there's a lot of people in both demographics. So there's still plenty of non-millennials to go at in this space, and we're seeing healthy interest from everybody.
Yeah. And Julia, how are you kind of encouraging Advantage members now to use the consumer research that you've done in order to maybe kind of alter who they're talking to and trying to appeal to?
I think it's really to give them a view as to how they can start to think about their marketing. And I think kind of really what everyone is saying, actually we all need that glimmer of hope, and none of us know. None of us are, the news this morning, actually we can go to France, from what I understood this morning. So France seems to be on the agenda. We seem to have a reciprocal agreement, which we didn't know about until it was reported this morning. So look, we all have to work in a scenario where we have to be as agile as possible. And really the research for us is about trying to give our members some ability to be able to forward plan, and by using the sentiments that were expressed, how can they, because they're all going to have to revolutionize how they market, how they communicate, how they talk, the destinations they're selling. So how can the research start to help them think about how they can make their marketing more in line with some of the research, some of the sentiments that were expressed. So it's not a holy grail, and I've seen a number of other research polls that have been out, and I think very similar, actually. The results seem to be very similar. So I think it's really about giving us all the ability to be able to forward plan and think about how we can position ourselves as we come out of this.
Yeah. And Lisa, do you think that at its core, what the UK travelling public are going to be looking for in holidays is going to change as a result of what we've been through over the last couple of months? You know, the sort of, not necessarily the places that we go, but the style of holidays that we want to take, how close we want to be to other people, that kind of thing.
I think, I mean, it was interesting to hear your previous panel talk about Airbnb specifically, because I think homestays and Airbnb and the sharing economy might find new challenges that didn't exist previously. You know, if you look at villa holidays, it's an ideal solution because you can travel overseas, but you've still got, you know, you're not surrounded by people that you don't know, but there will be potentially within hotels, people just booking packages to hotels where they can, you know, upgrade to club rooms. Again, just that feeling of space that people are used to through self-isolation. But I don't know. I think it's just too early at the moment to see that there's going to be a massive swing into what we're looking for out of our holidays. Although I do believe that protocols and health and safety protocols of destinations, of accommodation, will become more important, will become a priority to a certain age group that is more concerned. So I, you know, sweeping statements, but I would guess millennials, the younger traveller is probably not as concerned about health and safety protocols as the older generation is, as silver travellers will be. But nothing that, I mean, Derek mentioned multi-generational, you know, you may see more group travel coming out as a result of this, but I think it's just too early to say that there is going to be a fundamental switch from what the British traveller is searching for when they go on holiday. It's too early at the moment. As I say, apart from the health and safety being more higher up the agenda, which is going to be interesting because we're an industry that's used to selling dreams and selling the sizzle. So how do you weave in health and safety into your marketing campaigns?
Yeah. And I guess the interesting thing on that is actually, as an industry, that's always the first thing we consider anyhow. And as tour operators, always high on your agenda is health and safety. So we are used to delivering holidays to consumers with health and safety always being at the top of the agenda. But you're right. How do you turn that into a marketing message, or a message that gives consumers a confidence? Because we all need that. We all need to feel confident. I think the other thing from an agent's point of view, all our perspectives, it's just making sure that there is consistency in guidelines and clarity in terms of the whole ecosystem. So from the point at when you get into your, you know, your chauffeur drive, if you are, from your house to or the train, to the airport infrastructure, to on the plane, to the resort, the transfer. So it's actually, how as an industry do we ensure that we can provide that confidence around that whole ecosystem when we don't have control of it all. So certainly from an agent's perspective, you know, to be able to sell with confidence those holidays from the suppliers that we're working with, that's one of the things that we're going to be talking to our partners about. How can you help us with that and provide us that confidence so we can support our members with that real clarity and consistency of message that they can give to their consumers?
Yeah. Derek was making the interesting point, sorry, not Derek Jones, Derek Moore in the session previously around how some of the less formal accommodation sector might struggle to do everything that a more mainstream hotel can to ensure sort of hygiene standards and whatnot. And Derek, Kuoni will work with accommodation of all kinds of shapes and sizes. Is it going to be quite a big role for your Kuoni brand as such a big player to take some accommodation partners on that journey, or does it all need to come from them?
I think it's a tricky one, because I think you have to look at this in sort of timeline. So I think there's a short-term issue, short to medium term, and then there's the long term. So I think in the short to medium term, everyone is focused on how quickly can we get people traveling again, and without doubt, in order to achieve that goal, we are going to have to work very closely, all of us, with our suppliers right throughout the customer journey to make sure that the conditions are in place for the protection and well-being of our customers. That is simply a hygiene factor. I think it's quite difficult. It's almost not a competitive issue, because actually I think customers will rightly assume that anybody that's sending them on holiday has taken the right precautions. So I think it's a sort of industry piece that we all need to be clear that when the time is right and we go back into volume sales, if that overlaps with a period where coronavirus is still prevalent, then we are going to have to take very different precautions to make sure that our customers are safe. So I think that's sort of just an inevitable consequence of where we are. But I think you have to look beyond that. I think beyond that, and whether it's 18 months or 2 years or 3 years, however long in the future it is, you have to reach a point, I think, where we're beyond coronavirus. And at that point, I think we'll end up back in a very similar place to where we are now. I think the things that are likely to change longer term are more around sustainability, they're around the environment. That I think people will come out of this much more connected, both to the sort of their environmental surroundings, but also about their connections with other people. I think this will change society in a way. And I think, you know, brands now should be thinking about not just how do we transition out of this through health and safety and hygiene, but actually how do we rebuild for the future and what will be different and what will our customers be thinking of in the future? Because I think it will be different.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily that you've seen any evidence of that from a bookings point of view yet, Derek. It's more just how you feel the sort of the general sentiment is going to shift.
Yeah, well, I think from a booking point of view, we are in that short-term period right now. So to echo sort of what Lisa said, the three products that we are selling almost to the exclusion of everything else. So firstly, Indian Ocean, and particularly mould knives, which is 70% of everything we're selling. And I think that is partly driven by the remoteness of the islands, the fact that you do have space on those islands. You're in if you're in a nice villa, then you are fairly isolated. Villas through CV are selling exceptionally well. And interesting, the third one that's selling well is safaris. So actually there does seem to be quite an appetite. I mean, again, whether people think they're in a lodge, they're out on safari, they're fairly isolated, they're in big open space. But all three of those, I think, not sort of uncoincidentally, are just around how do I find space and isolation. And I think in the short term, that will be key. I mean, I think that the businesses, the experiences that will struggle in the short term are sort of the big all-inclusive hotels, you know, the ones with the big buffets crowded around the pools. That's not to say they can't redesign that experience to make it acceptable. But clearly there's work to be done over the course of the next 12 months to make that a product that people are still going to feel safe and secure to book.
Yeah.
I think you also have, each customer, each consumer has a different perception of risk. So you talk about informal accommodation. You know, if I think of, I did Killy, as you know, last November. My expectation wasn't of a sanitized experience. And, I think that will, if a consumer still has not an appetite for risk, but is not too concerned about a risk, then they will still travel to those destinations. You know, malaria is prevalent in a number of places around the world, but you will either choose to go to that destination based on what you know about that risk or not. And look, COVID is global, but there are some consumers out there that don't see the risk as much as other consumers do. So it's really difficult to make, I think, sweeping statements about any particular destination, holiday type or consumer, because everybody's perception of how much risk there is to travel is different from the others.
Yeah.
Is this not back down to, I mean, Derek, you mentioned something I think really interesting there before around the, when we come out of this, so obviously we've got a short-term issue, when we come out of this, actually, what is that consistency that every operator, everyone in the ecosystem needs to adhere to, bit like, health and safety standards now, what is that consistency of approach that we all need to be able to confidently sell our products in a really confident way? And I think, as an industry, we're very entrepreneurial and we've come up against so many issues over the years, and we've managed to kind of get ourselves through that by reinventing ourselves in the right manner, in the right way, based on what consumer needs are, etc. So I think, as an industry, it is, we keep talking about working together. We're not really one industry, but we have to work like one. And I think now more than ever, particularly as we come through this, just to ensure that we're doing everything we can to ensure consumers' confidence is, top of the agenda. Well, health and safety clearly, but consumers have the confidence to travel. But know that as an industry, we have consistency in our guidelines and our policies that enable them to, make those informed decisions.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier about the importance of private sector and public sector working together. I just wondered, Derek and Lisa, you work closely with tourist boards often. Are you already having conversations with them about, working together to get specific messaging out, or is it a little bit early to be kind of doing joint marketing and whatnot?
I would say it's early to be doing the marketing, but it's not too early to be planning the marketing, which is at the stage we're at. And I think, we've had long relationships with a number of key tourist boards, and I think that's going to become even more critical going forward as well. So I can only see that being something we work on even more closely with them. And as I say, we're in conversation with a number of people already.
Yeah, I think we've taken the opportunity to have a lot of informal conversations, a lot of Zoom meetings. We've met with sort of hotel management boards, tourist boards, not really with a set agenda with outcome in mind, more just to sort of help each other through what is a very sort of unknown and uncharted territory. And I think they need to understand much better what's actually happening on the ground in the UK. Because they're just taking their news from their local channels, and let's be honest, they don't always get the full detail of the full story. And similarly for us, I mean, it's been really interesting talking to hotel groups about what they're doing with their teams and their staff during this time. Well, there's islands in the Maldives with 400 staff isolated on them at the moment, which I don't think as an industry we're sort of thinking necessarily about, what challenges have they got and how are they coping with them. So I think there's been a real... It's almost been a sort of pause for breath, where I think we could sort of get to know our suppliers and tourist boards and other sectors better and empathise with the challenges that they've got. And I think, although it's maybe a little bit too soon in that cycle, I think as we come through this, if we keep that dialogue going, then I think we will come up with good answers. I think we will. It's only by talking to each other and understanding where we're both at that we'll begin to formulate our way out of it. So it's very early, but yeah, I think this will be a very collaborative approach.
Yeah, we've certainly heard about lots of sort of hotels and other brands on the ground using the opportunity for training and decorating and revamping and whatnot. So there'll hopefully be some local businesses that come out of it in a stronger position, if at all possible. Can I ask what kind of conversations you're having with them around pricing, which is something that's going to be key for reinvigorating the market? Hotels have taken a huge hit and need to recoup that money, but will also be very, very keen to work with you and try and have some attractive deals on the market. What can you tell us about those sorts of conversations?
Well, from our point of view, we're not seeing significant price increases on contracted stock for 2021. If anything, I think suppliers have been bending over backwards to make sure that for rebookings and for any new bookings in the pipeline right now, that they gain that revenue back. I think they're very conscious of how difficult it's going to be. I don't think anyone's expecting a sudden boom. And even if they are, I don't think anyone's prepared to gamble on that happening. So I think everybody is in a position where they're very grateful for any business that's put their way right now, and they're prepared to put very good offers into the marketplace to secure it. So now we're really not across the board seeing anybody trying to sort of hike prices and take advantage.
No, I would agree entirely with what Derek said there. I think we've seen hoteliers roll over this year into next year. And I think, nobody knows what load factors are going to look like, what occupancy levels are going to look like. So whereas the normal world of yield management would allow people to, maximize their margins, that's just not happening at the moment. It is more of an understanding of where the market is, where the industry is. I genuinely don't believe anybody's sat there rubbing their hands thinking this is an opportunity for them. So we haven't seen huge price hikes from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and to what extent do you think price will be a factor in your kind of marketing going forward, Lisa? Do you think there'll be a lot of kind of book now, discounts available kind of marketing in order to get hold of some of that market?
Yeah, I think Derek on the previous panel touched on this really well. Price for me will only be one element of the story that you have to say. I think trust, but I think value and value doesn't always mean cheap. And I think there will be a whole host of, and it depends who your audience is, and it depends what destination you're trying to drive business to, but it won't just be about price. Price is only ever one lever, but it depends on, that there'll be that trade-off between price and volume, as there always is. Discounting, we've always been an industry where it's, heartbreakingly, it tends to be a race to the bottom when people want volume. But, I think there'll be a contraction in the market, so undoubtedly. So I think it's too early to say how that will play out. But for me, price, as I say, is only one element. It won't just be a price message.
Yeah.
It will be too narrow if you just sell on price. Absolutely, it will.
Yeah, that's not the message that's going to work for a good chunk of the market who wants something else.
There's going to be, sorry, just to add, there's going to be a really interesting dynamic around aviation capacity and hotel capacity, because I think all the noises that are coming out of aviation right now are suggesting that they are planning a much slower regrowth in order to look after their margins going forward. So I think you could end up in a position where it's less about individual supplier contracted rates and more about the overall effect of having lower airline capacity in the marketplace, and hotels effectively with fixed capacity trying to chase for fewer customers, because the ability to send the number of customers to them has actually declined for a significant period of time. So I think that's something that we're all going to have to understand the dynamics of that as it goes forward. I think seat prices on recovery are going to increase quite significantly, but land prices could in effect decline as they all chase fewer customers arriving. So I don't know what the net effect of that is, but I think we're all going to have to yield a little bit differently.
I think as well, in addition to that, we've got to remember we're only one source market. So, there's plenty of other global source markets that will be either assessing their opportunity or and as a hotelier, you absolutely will be looking at that. What source market is going to drive me volume, and where can I get the right yield from as well? So it may end up being a bun fight.
Yeah, that's somebody's commented along those lines. Jane from Authentic Travel says hotels are being good, but BA, for example, is definitely putting up flight prices for next year. So that sort of supports what you were saying there, Derek, that aviation costs might go up even if accommodation comes down. Hopefully it'll mean not too great an increase overall for the consumer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, that the sentiment that we're getting from the members is quite different, and it's not about specific operators, and I wouldn't know who they are, but the general sentiment, the general consensus is actually we are seeing higher prices for next year. And I think, that may well be driven by the airline side of it. So this is really when we're talking about packages, so the airline side of it, the airline portion. But, as a general consensus, we are seeing higher prices already for next year.
And are members concerned that that's making their job tougher at the moment?
Yeah, it's concerning right now with, obviously, when we're trying to rebook, and not to talk about credit notes, but when we're trying to manage all those, and you're trying to rebook a holiday, the same holiday for next year, but the price has gone up, and obviously nobody's holding the price. So it is, that is an absolute challenge.
We touched there upon different outbound markets, different source markets, and their appeal to various inbound destinations. Interested, perhaps, Derek, from your point of view, Touristik UK is obviously part of a bigger group. Do you think the perception of the UK outbound market is quite damaged at the moment? Do you think there'll be destinations and partners that Touristik works with more widely that will be a bit more interested in some of your European counterparts than the UK market at the moment?
It's difficult to say. I think probably in the very short term. In the space of, if you think in terms of weeks and months, then right now the position of the UK doesn't look spectacularly good compared to some of our European colleagues and the way their countries have dealt with this situation. But underneath that, in reality, it's not very different. And if you look at Sweden, Sweden have taken a very relaxed approach to social distancing. Their numbers of cases per head of population are very similar now to the UK. If you look what's happened in Spain, look at the numbers that came out of France. We're all at different stages of the cycle, and this is only the first cycle. So I think you need to you sort of need to let this whole crisis play out. It may look very different when it comes to the end of this summer than it does right now. So certainly for the moment, it's not an unreasonable conclusion to reach. I don't think what's happening right now is a good indication of where we're going to be at the end of the summer. I think we may be in a very different situation. And at the end of it all, no country in Europe is claiming 0 cases. They're all managing a smaller number of cases. So as an inbound destination, you can't be half pregnant, can you? You're either accepting arrivals from a country with coronavirus or you're not. And if you're not, then you're ruling out the whole of Europe. And if you are, then you're really just making a judgment about the number of cases per head of population in each part of the world. So it's not. It looks like quite a simple dynamic. I actually think it's much more complicated, and I do think we're going to have to let the whole thing roll out in order to see how people make those choices.
We talked a bit about how consumer demand and traveller trends may evolve. How quickly can you respond to those sorts of changes in the market? Lisa, for example, I don't know how much villa product you've got at the moment with your brands, but how quickly could you respond if the numbers do quickly begin to support some of the possible trends that we've talked about?
If we see something and it's warranted and it's commercially viable, then we'll go for it. I mean, in the conversations that I've had so far, I don't see us dropping anywhere from our portfolio. But I do see the opportunity to add to it for exactly that reason, that, if different styles or types of holidays, even domestically, we've had a conversation about domestic, should we sell domestic holidays? But again, it's just too early at the moment to green light anything, to say, yes, okay, let's go and sell the UK. We have it on sale now anyway, via the feeds that we take. But, you also run the risk of digressing too much from your core product, and that's not necessarily a good thing to do either. So I think we've got to be careful of, is it a trend or is it a short-term opportunity? And if it's a long-term trend, then absolutely we'll adjust accordingly. But if it's just a short-term opportunity, to be honest, the setup costs and all of that I need to be able to sell it, to then communicate it, it's not really something that I would be interested. I don't want to deal in a flash in the pan quick win. It needs to form part of a longer term strategy for me. But we will be adding to that. I mean, in B2B we sell less than 5% of what we sell is Europe, but I do think there'll be an opportunity coming out of this to sell more European business. And fillers may form a part of that as well. Rail travel, we sell a small selection of rail travel today. We'll be looking to extend that further as well.
And Derek, do you anticipate any kind of evolution of your products at the moment across your brands, or again a bit too early to be making any adjustments really to what you're focusing on?
I mean, in some ways we're quite lucky. We've got a broad portfolio of products in the UK. I mean, we talked about villas, and we own CV Villas. The top end of the market, we have carrier holidays. We've got Kirker for city breaks. Actually, we've sort of got most of the bases covered. So we're quite nimble. We're quite fleet of foot of being able to move into those areas that we see performing well, and we can manage a downturn on areas that aren't performing as well, because we can simply remix. So we will of course adjust, and we will look for opportunities, or we work opportunistically to grow into those areas. So for example, Safari I mentioned earlier, if we see that that's one of the first parts of our portfolio to come back, then we'll obviously put more investment and more marketing into those areas. Interestingly, sort of related to this, and if you consider the sales process as part of our product, which we absolutely do, in fact it's a sort of critical part of it, one thing that we have seen is customer acceptance of video calls and video conferencing, and we've been doing it reactively for 2 or 3 weeks, but we have absolutely spotted the customers are very happy with it. So later this week we are going to formally launch a sales product, which is a Zoom appointments product, to give customers the opportunity to pre-book in the same way as they'd have booked an appointment in a store, to book an appointment with a travel expert, handpicked to make sure they're expert on their destination, in order to have a video conference conversation with them. So I think I just use that as an example because it's not just the product that you're selling, it's actually about the way you're working and the way you operate. And some of these things may stick, and some of them might not, but now's a great time to actually experiment a little bit, because there's not a great deal to lose. You know, if you try something now and it bombs, no one's going to remember, are they? You just give it a go. As long as Lisa said, you're not pouring money down the pan after it. It's quite a good time actually to have a little play around, and we've been sending a lot of our customer database once a week a sort of questionnaire and saying, look, whilst we understand you're not booking holidays, but we know you're sat at home. Can you spare half an hour to complete the survey, or even just give us some feedback? And it's amazing how positive customers have reacted to that. So there will be nuggets out there. There'll be information out there that we can gather. Julia started talking about a survey she's done with her members. Now's a great time to look for inspiration and look for new ideas and try and find different approaches for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, and also as retailers in the chain, we need products. So I actually think we do need some flash in the pan, quick wins. So we are already looking at actually what does that mean for our portfolio. So if we can't get the product that we think, whether it's domestic, villas, whatever it is, through current suppliers, who do we go to right now? So there's absolute short-term requirement, clearly long-term needs, but I think right now trying to think about the long-term is not where our members want to be. It's about what do I need right now, where are those gaps, and who are best to satisfy those for me. And back to the point I made before, we are an entrepreneurial industry, and I don't think we'll ever lose that, but we've got to be agile enough to make some quick changes as and when needed as well.
Yeah. The domestic market's an interesting one for your members, Julia, because it's historically not been a huge seller for a lot of travel agents, has it? They've always focused on outbound and long haul and tailor-made and whatnot. And there's a lot of players in the UK market that don't actively work with travel agents, actually. So there's sometimes been a bit of a disconnect there. But do you see this as being an opportunity for retailers to possibly just get to better grips with the domestic sector and make it a bigger part of their business?
Yeah, I think so, and we do sell the domestic market. Obviously, that is sold through the members, and that's there's good volume, nowhere near the outbound market. I think the problem with the UK is always capacity. You're very limited. So if you want to go to the southwest in the summer, it's very limited in terms of how many cottages, apartments, etc. We don't build them. We don't, so that's the issue. That's always the issue in the peak months, trying to get to the parts of the UK that everyone wants to be at. Is very difficult, but we're happily right now we will engage with suppliers that we traditionally haven't worked with before, and looking at creating win-win partnerships, even if it is short term, but actually how do we all help and support each other in the domestic market right now, I think is really critical.
Yeah, great. We've almost run out of time actually, but perhaps just a final question to all of you, which would be, where would you be going on your next holiday when you're allowed to safely? Inspire us with a lovely destination, please.
Well, I'm booked for October. So I was due for Easter, Dubai and the Maldives. So that's me jetting off in October.
Oh, wonderful. Fingers crossed, Lisa.
Yep.
I'm still booked for August to Sardinia. So Jess, yeah, let's keep the fingers and toes crossed.
Yes. Oh, that sounds amazing. Derek?
Well, we've been planning to take the kids on a safari for years. It's one of those big family holidays, and the time had to be right. And we literally just booked it for Easter. We were all going to South Africa. We were doing the garden route safari, Cape Town, the winelands. We had this perfect itinerary all put together. And then we immediately had to cancel it about 3 weeks after we booked it. So I think as soon as this is done, that's definitely back on the agenda. But in the meantime, my camper van is revving up on the driveway, waiting for some sort of flag to be dropped by Boris so that we can all head off somewhere into the countryside or to a beach or just somewhere to get a break from lockdown. So we've got a standby, but the big one is going to be South Africa.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, I hope all three of you will be able to fulfill those travel dreams very shortly. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. Really appreciate your time, and thanks to everybody who's been listening in on Zoom as well.